All right, so let's jump right in. We're about to unpack one of the most foundational stories ever told, Genesis chapter 3. You know, if you think about the first two chapters, they're all about how this perfect world was created, order, relationship, all that good stuff. Well, this chapter, this is the story of the moment it all breaks. This is the fracture.
And to really get a grip on what happens here, you've got to see the sheer contrast. I mean, think about it. Before this moment, the world is described with words like order, peace, trust. But after, wow, everything changes. The world is suddenly defined by rupture, fear, and blame. So the big question is, how in the world did we get from that to this?
You know, what's so wild is that this massive, world-altering shift didn't start with some huge bang, not an earthquake or a war. It wasn't some grand, violent catastrophe. Instead, it all began so quietly, so subtly, with just a single deceptive question. A question that was designed to create just a tiny, tiny crack in the foundation of everything.
And here's the thing. This story isn't just about something that happened once, a long, long time ago. The source material shows us that it actually follows this really distinct pattern, almost like a blueprint for how things tend to go wrong. And honestly, it's a pattern that you can see repeated over and over again, even in our own lives today. Okay, so here's the roadmap, this fall pattern. It all kicks off with deception. That deception leads to a fateful decision. And right after that decision comes this wave of shame, which causes separation. Then that separation just spirals into blame, which of course brings about a consequence, and the whole thing ends in exile. It's a 7-step cascade, really. So let's walk through it piece by piece. So the first step, deception, is absolutely crucial because of how it begins. The serpent doesn't just storm in and say, God doesn't exist. No way. The attack is way more subtle, way more clever than that. It just starts with a simple question. Did God really say? It's all about twisting God's words and, maybe more importantly, God's character. It's designed to plant just one little seed of doubt. And this strategy is just a brilliant, insidious twist of intent. See, God gave a clear boundary, but it was for their protection, for their flourishing. The serpent takes that exact same boundary and reframes it. Suddenly, it's not a protection, it's a restrictive rule from some kind of stingy God who's holding out on them. It's a masterclass in creating confusion and doubt. And this really gets to the heart of what's going on here. The story is defining sin as not just, breaking some arbitrary rule. It's way deeper than that. It's a fundamental shift in trust. It's that moment humanity decides, you know what? I'm going to stop trusting God's wisdom, and I'm going to start trusting my own judgment instead.
So, naturally, this massive shift in trust leads directly into the second step of the pattern, the decision. And the crazy part is, the moment that choice is made, the internal consequences are immediate, and they are profound.
You have to understand, the temptation Eve faced wasn't simple. It was hitting on multiple levels. There was the physical desire, it was good for food. There was the visual appeal, pleasing to the eye, and then the most powerful one, the appeal to her identity. This idea that it was desirable for gaining wisdom, for being like God. And this is so important. We can't forget that Adam was standing right there. He was silent, and in this story, his silence is his participation. And then comes that famous line, suddenly their eyes were opened. But here's the thing, nothing about their physical bodies actually changed in that moment. What changed, and this is the key, was their perception. Their awareness of themselves was just fundamentally rewired.
And that rewiring, that alteration, well, that's what we call shame. This is the birth of self-consciousness right here. It's that awful moment when simple awareness curdles and turns into insecurity, when just being exposed turns into a source of deep fear. And what's the first thing they do? They cover themselves up and they go and hide.
And the pattern just keeps on rolling. Hiding from God very quickly turns into hiding from responsibility. That internal fracture, it now explodes outward, shattering their relationships through blame and deflection.
I mean, listen to this. When God confronts Adam, his response is just fascinating. He doesn't just blame the woman. No, he says, the woman you gave to be with me. Wow. In one single sentence, he manages to deflect all responsibility onto both Eve and God himself. It's incredible. And what does Eve do? She follows the exact same playbook. She doesn't take ownership of her choice for a second. Instead, she just deflects the blame one step further down the line, pointing straight at the serpent. And just like that, the cycle of fractured responsibility is complete. All right, so the blame game is over, and now the story shifts to the consequences. But listen, these are not just random, angry punishments being thrown around. No, they are incredibly targeted. They relate directly to each character's specific role in the failure.
And look at how specific these consequences are. The serpent, who is the great deceiver, is cursed. The woman, the life giver, will now experience pain in the very act of creating life and strife in her most core relationship. And the man, the one who is supposed to cultivate the garden, will now find his work becoming exhausting toil, literally fighting the very ground he was meant to care for. It's poetry, in a tragic kind of way.
Now, you'd think that would be the end of the story, right? Judgment falls, credits roll. But right in the middle of all these consequences, something totally unexpected happens. We start to see these first little glimmers of grace, of mercy, appearing right there in the ruins. Just think about this for a second. Adam and Eve, they try to cover their own shame with these flimsy, pathetic little fig leaves. But then God steps in. He provides them with durable garments made of skin. He covers them, and he covers them properly. But this act, it implies a cost, doesn't it? An animal had to die. And this is the very first hint that grace, real grace, comes with a sacrifice. And get this, even their exile from the garden is reframed as an act of mercy. And you might think, how is that mercy? Well, think it through. It prevented them from eating from the tree of life and being locked into that broken, shame-filled state for all of eternity. Yeah, the separation was incredibly painful, but it actually prevented a far, far worse fate. So, okay. Why does this ancient story still hit so hard today? Why does it resonate so deeply with us? Well, it's because it serves as this incredible blueprint for so many of our modern internal struggles. It gives a name, it gives language to feelings we all experience probably every single day. I mean, just think about your own life for a second. Why do we so often feel this need to hide parts of ourselves from other people? To curate the perfect image online, to be terrified of being truly fully known? Well, this story suggests an answer. It's because shame distorts our sense of who we are. It makes us believe that if we are fully exposed, we'll be rejected. And that fear started right here in the garden. Okay, and how about this one? Why is our first instinct so often to point the finger, to just immediately deflect responsibility when things go wrong, whether it's at our jobs, in our friendships, or with our families? And again, the pattern holds up. The story shows that this initial shift in trust away from God immediately fractured our sense of personal responsibility. Deflecting ownership, passing the buck, it basically became our factory default setting. So here's the thought I want to leave you with. Genesis 3 paints a really honest picture of a deeply fractured world, a world that is clearly not as it was meant to be. But woven right into that same exact story of judgment is this undeniable thread of hope, a promise that this fracture won't have the final say. So it leaves us with this huge question. What if the story is telling us not just that the world is broken, but that it has not been abandoned?